Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Today I want to talk some more about Charlie Kirk's assassination and the ongoing responses that we're seeing around the world and here in Canada in particular as well. Before we do that, don't forget to hit subscribe, tell your friends about us as well. And our guest today is Faytene Grasseschi. Many of you will recognize that name. She's the host of the Faytene television program, and she's also been involved in Canadian politics, running for public office, coming very close actually to winning a seat in the East Coast back in 2024. So Faytene.tv is where you can catch episodes with Faytene. Good to have you with us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Oh, looking forward to this conversation because, being involved in politics yourself, you've probably bumped into some of this stuff yourself here. And we've seen such a barrage of various responses from, media personalities, right? Politicians, academics, business people, school teachers, and far too many of them actually celebrating the death of a fellow human being. Yes, he was, politically involved. Yes, he was Christian. He was outspoken. But man, he's somebody's son, somebody's husband, wow.
Yeah, you're nailing it right there. I was actually thinking back over the last couple of weeks. We're almost at the 2-week mark of the assassination as of the recording of this right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I've kind of gone through phases of processing. There was the initial shock and trauma of like, wow, what just happened? Just grieving for his wife, his kids. He's got a 1 and a 3-year-old, just so heartbroken. And then obviously for Rob and myself, having just run for political office and experiencing some of the vitriol that does come towards candidates and, candidates who are people of faith or have conservative leaning values, perhaps, there's such a polarization right now. So no matter who you are, if you're conservative or liberal, you're going to probably get some intensity, right? And so obviously it hit very, very close to home for Robert and myself, who had to take extra security measures to protect our own family over the last couple of years. But then when this jubilation began to come out, this was within the first 48 hours of the assassination. And of course, we saw the video of the legal aid worker in British Columbia, the remarks from the political leader there in Manitoba, the U of T professor. That was a point for me, Paul, and I think for many, where chills started to go down our back to say, like, where are we at in society where there are individuals that I would say are in such a mental and emotional state that they could actually celebrate the death of a man just because of his political positioning. To me, that was a very chilling moment, because I think anytime you dehumanize anyone, any segment of society, like we could roll back in our own history with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, there was a dehumanization of them, during the time of the residential schools, comments that were made by our elected officials, about the Native people to dehumanize them. And because of that, it was almost like some people felt justified in the atrocities that were done. And now obviously we're living in the brokenness of that. We've repented of that. Our hearts are broken for that. But I share that as an illustration to say, anytime we dehumanize a segment of society, bad things happen, horrible things happen. And so I feel like, Paul, we are really at a moment of decision right now as Canadians to say, what kind of people do we want to be? Do we want to be people that can sit in the public square, have a heated debate about an issue, an item of the day that we are all passionate about, all have different perspectives on, but can we keep decorum? Can we keep a sense of connectedness to the reality of the person's humanity that we disagree with? Can we be kind? And at the end of the day, could we maybe even be friends, believing that truly when ideas bump up against one another, iron sharpens iron. And this is where great policy can happen, is when there's a rubbing and an ability to debate. But the minute we start to vilify one another, the minute we start to label one another so intensely, it dissolves that ability to debate, to communicate. And I want to go so far as to say we have an obligation, Paul, to our kids, because our behavior is modeling something to the next generation. We must contend for decorum in the public square and for kindness.
Yeah, it needs to happen, I think, now. this is not something that we can wait around on. Yeah, it's quite troubling when I see, again, it's not just here and there. There's a lot of stuff, at least on social media, that you're seeing. And again, I wonder, if we had more face-to-face, would people be less likely to say something that dire in somebody's face, you deserve to die, that sort of thing? Well, some people do, I guess, but it's easier to do online, right? The value of human life, we need to see a return to that, because every life has value, including, Charlie Kirk's murderer. His life actually has value. He's made in the image of God. Now, he's, of course, stepped out of, however you want to label that, of course, doing some evil things that way. But fascinating to see at the memorial in Arizona, in front of, 100,000 people, something like that. And, of course, millions upon millions around the world. Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow. I forgive you. What do you say to that?
Well, I just say thank you, Erica Kirk, for your courage. I can't imagine how deeply she had to dig in that moment. You could tell by the expression on her face. Obviously, she is a woman of faith, very, very solid woman of faith. She understands that the Bible, as believers, does command us. It doesn't suggest to us, but it does command us to forgive and to bless those who curse you and to rejoice when you are persecuted for righteousness' sake. This is all over the Gospels, right?
Yeah.
But it's one thing to know it and it's another thing to do it. And I'm so proud of her. I don't know her personally, but I'm just so proud of her as a woman and just somebody who just had a little taste of the vitriol that comes against people in the public square. And she, in that moment, modeled to the entire planet the strength of the gospel. This is what Jesus did on the cross, right? He hung there and looking at those who killed them, those who beat him, that belittled him, that accused him, that labeled him. If anybody was ever labeled by the mob, it was Jesus, right?
Absolutely.
and to be able to look at his oppressors in that moment and say, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do.
Well,
I really believe that young man didn't know. Like, if he would have known what he was actually doing, number one, it worked against him. He was trying to silence Charlie Kirk, but now it's like he's launched a global movement.
Yeah.
So it didn't work what he was trying to do. But number two, if he really had, heaven's heart for humanity, he never would have done that. And so he really didn't know what he does. And I do pray that revelation, and maybe it already has, will come to him before long. And I think Erica releasing that forgiveness, she showed us how to do it. She showed those who are not Christians what the gospel actually is, the strength of the gospel. And I do hope that message got to that young man and that it touched his heart. I don't know how it couldn't have.
Yeah, and anybody else who kind of thinks that way, hopefully this message is touching people, even as we speak now. I mean, as people are seeing Charlie Kirk as a martyr, and I think there's certainly some truth to that. And again, somewhat comparable to what Jesus went through. They wanted to shut him up because he was speaking truth in love. But of course, sometimes that truth hurts us, in the sense that, I'm recognizing I'm not doing what's right. I need to change. But, I just want to instead shut up that person, right? And that's what they tried to do with Charlie Kirk. But so I guess what does his death accomplish? Out of this, either one or two things is going to happen. It could be successful in the sense of those who'd like to shut up Charlie Kirk and those who think like him. Do we shrink back out of the threat of violence? And of course, there can be wisdom in that at times. We need to, take safety precautions and so forth. But we still need to keep on speaking, I think. And on the other hand, does this actually, kaboom, expand Charlie Kirk's ministry, his message, umpteen times, right? And I think that's what's going to happen is, again, you're seeing this, I am Charlie Kirk. In different places around the world, you're seeing young people rise up saying, I'm going to speak up. Lord, send me, right? Your thoughts?
Oh, I think it's already happened. Yeah. The last data that I saw that the request to start TP USA, Turning Point USA chapters on college campuses throughout the US, I think has more than doubled. I
Wow.
know that all of their social media has like massively exploded. Obviously, Eric Kirk's platform is massively exploding. The memorial being aired not only on all the major US networks. I saw that ABC, Fox, obviously aired it. Clips of it are being aired all over the place. Obviously, some selective clipping. A lot of people have,
Yes.
or some networks have, skipped over the beautiful moments of the memorial and Erica Kirk's speeches and gone right into, Donald Trump's jokes and so just the exposure there, the impact on the next generation. And if I could say something personal for me,
Mhm.
shortly after the assassination, and as we were processing it and observing this celebration of the death of a man, I received a text, and it was from the guys who were going to be organizing the vigil in Calgary. And they asked me, it was actually the night before, they said, Faytene, would you be willing to come and just, knowing that I'm a person of faith, they said, would you be willing to pray a prayer for the youth of America, the youth of Canada, the next generation, that demographic that Charlie, you really had such a heart for. And, I took a moment and I made a decision. And I made a decision in that moment that I was going to fortify courage
Hmm.
in my inside world. And, I knew that I was going to be before. I didn't know if it was going to be a couple hundred people or a few thousand. I think the final crowd count ended up being around 5,000. I don't know for
Really?
sure, but that's what it looked like to me. My husband couldn't even find a parking spot. And, you know, but I stood up there and I released a prayer. And that was my act of defiance towards
Hmm.
fear.
Hmm.
And
Good for
and that was
you.
my moment of deciding, as for me and my family, we are going to stand for the things that we believe in, whatever that might be in any given moment on any given issue, but that we have a responsibility, to cultivate a society that is full of courageous people that are loving and kind, but that we don't shrink back in fear. I think the worst thing that anybody could do right now is to go toxic, right? And just
Yeah.
start spewing vitriol or to pull back and shrink back. And so everybody's got that opportunity to make that choice in different ways, whether it's at the grocery store, in a conversation, in the lineup, whether it's in a town hall where you have an opportunity to ask a question of the premier at Alberta Next, or whatever it might be. We all have to make those powerful choices right now to choose love, but also to choose courage. And they can and should exist simultaneously.
I want to encourage our viewers, especially young people, so, you know what? It's like when you're a kid trying to jump off that diving board. It's pretty scary at first, but it's really not that far. And once you do it, hey, it becomes fun actually and enjoyable. We need to do the same thing here as well, I think. Get engaged. So it might be at, lunchtime at work, okay, or in the hallways in a college, wherever it might be. And yeah, engage in conversation. So, why do you feel that way about whatever topic you want to? It could be abortion, could be, whatever kind of social issues there are going on. Right? There's tons of them. We don't run out of those, and they tend to be controversial and polarizing and so forth. But again, with love, with genuine care, I actually do want to hear why you feel that way because there's reasons for this, typically from people's backgrounds, how they were raised and so forth, what their, life experience has been. And when you, I think, show that care and actually listen to what they're saying and then maybe ask a few questions to get them thinking about, have you ever considered thinking about it in this manner, and of course steering them toward a biblical principle or a biblical truth, and good things can happen there, I think. But we've got to get that, see ourselves, I guess, as being the quote unquote Charlie Kirks, just in everyday life.
Yeah, that's a powerful thought. And, I'm thinking again about my experience in running for office. And what I found was that there was really two worlds. And one was this online world where people seem to be quite a bit more unfiltered, a lot more vicious. There's a lot more vitriol. And then there was the real world. And what I found, Paul, was that when I would meet people in real life, whether it was at the Tim Hortons or whether it was at a community event, a market, and engage with them just in direct conversation, I would find that even the people that most passionately disagreed with me, I remember one individual, I knocked on her door and I did kudos to her. I was so impressed by her. She just came out and she said, I disagree with everything about you, because she had seen stuff on social media. But, her and I together, we were able to have this really deep discourse, for probably about 5 or 10 minutes. And, at the end of the discourse, we still didn't agree, but there was a friendship that was forged and a respect for humanity. And then, I'd go home at night and, maybe check in on what was happening on social media, and you would just see the vitriol and the hate. And I would say this, like, yes, engage online, try to have that decorum, try to, demonstrate all of the virtues that we're talking about right here in that social media space. But we have to realize that real life happens, not in front of the keyboard, but in the public square. And, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make friends with people that disagree with you. And I think as all of us do that, Paul, that is really what's going to shift the culture. And it's what's going to model to our kids and the next generation, how it can be done and how a nation can be built.
I've caught some of my own kids, and I got a lot of them. I got a lot of kids, big family. We have these
Kids do you
debates.
have, Paul? I don't even know.
We got 12. So
Oh my God.
yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
They're awesome. And I hear the young people talking at church, sometimes debating things or whatever, or at home we'll be discussing some things. And sometimes I'll catch some of the kids saying something toward maybe a marginalized group or whatever, or somebody they disagree with, right? And I could see there's anger there. There's a kind of a superiority, kind of maybe an approach. Who are these guys? What are they? And I'm addressing it, saying, guys, how are we to best approach this in a manner that Jesus would, if he was here with us right now, sitting here in the room, how would he approach this, right? Jesus can be very direct, that sort of thing, of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but always with grace and truth and respect, dignity, showing that this person has value. And when people feel valued, we all long for that. Every person I've ever met anywhere longs to be accepted, to be valued, to be loved. That's what we're all seeking. Of course,
Yeah, and
often in the wrong place, but yeah.
I want to say this too, as I know we're coming to our time here, I think pretty quickly, but the importance of people of faith, people that being involved in the public square. What I've noticed in the last few years, Paul, is that because there's been such a faith shaming culture that has arisen primarily in, whether it's Hollywood, mainstream media, but this sort of mindset that, people of faith somehow shouldn't be in the public square. I want to say this to everybody who's watching. If you're a person of faith and you are a taxpayer,
Come on.
if you pay taxes, if you live in Canada, you pay property taxes and sales tax, and you contribute to society, it is your duty
Yes.
to engage in the public square. Because I'll never forget the time years ago I was talking to David Maines before he passed away. And I won't get into the whole story because of time right now, but he leaned over to me and he said, Faytene, the nation goes to those who show up. And those who show up.
Good comment.
To those who show up to the meetings. And sometimes these faith shaming cultures, these mindsets are basically strengthened, whether it's in our municipalities or provinces or in the nation, just simply because we're not there to show the truth of who people of faith are. If we pull out and the only people that are there are the folks that maybe hate people of faith, or maybe that's too strong of a word, strongly don't like, then what's going to happen is society is going to begin to be steered in that direction, whether it's our libraries, whether it's our public spaces, whether it's the types of things that are being put out on the airwaves. But we need to show up, and all voices need to show up. I want to say this, not just our voice, but every voice. If you pay taxes in Canada, which I'm sure everybody watching does in some measure, you have a responsibility, but you also have I want to say this, a right. You have a right to be present. You have a right to bring your voice to the table. And when I use the word right, I don't mean that in a, a combative sort of way, but just in a civil duty way, that we have a responsibility. And if you truly believe that the values and the virtues that you care about are the ones that will lead to a healthy and strong society for our kids, you have a moral obligation to be present for the sake of future generations and let the best ideas win. That's what I say. That's what
Yeah, and that's what Charlie Kirk was all about, right? I mean, yeah, in our political world, we have issues that too often, well, it's a settled issue. We don't want to talk about that. Again, I've mentioned abortion. That's one of those there, right? And yet, if you look at the polls, it's far from settled. There's actually a vast majority of Canadians who disagree with gender-selective abortion, for example, right? So you're going to abort.
Yeah, and also just to drive the truck through the front door here, there's a lot of Canadians that don't know that there are no legal restraints on abortion in Canada right now, which means you can abort a child right up until full term birth. My 2 babies were born a little bit premature, like 37, 38 weeks, healthy, strong. And in Canada, it's legal to abort a baby that is fully viable outside of the mother's body. So a lot of people just don't even know that. So I say, hey, there, lob that one out there, guys. Just talk about that. Yeah. Did you know that in Canada? Because a lot of people don't know. And what I've found is that even the most ardent, hardened of pro-choice activists still feel deeply uncomfortable with the idea of aborting a fully formed child that is viable outside the womb. So these are conversations, right? These are just conversations. And I want to say to that point, a lot of times folks will say, well, that never happens in Canada. Well, the reality is it's not true. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen in terms of third trimester abortion. But then my thought would be like, okay, well, if it doesn't happen, then why not just deal with it in law and move on? And then nobody's gonna, if it doesn't really happen, it's a mute law. But if it does happen, then you just saved the life of a fully formed child that is loved and wanted, right? So these are, why can't we have that conversation? I don't know. I don't know why we can't have that.
Again, people get scared probably because the conversation so often turns into name calling and put downs, which is really interesting. If you ever find yourself in a conversation where you're calling somebody else a name or putting them down, speaking down to them, that's a red flag that should rise up immediately going, lack of intelligence, can't think of anything else to say. Just saying, right? Yeah. If that's how we're speaking, then we need to readjust what's going on here and here. All right, we need to have a respectful conversation. Facts matter. I'm just getting, well, it's a whole other program there, I suppose. But
conversation is king.
It's so important. Actually, I should bring up. Maybe I'll bring up the Jimmy Kimmel thing's making all the rounds these days, right? Of course, he got canceled there, and now some ABC stations are putting him back on. Although it's an interesting thing, because again, from best I could tell, Jimmy Kimmel, did actually go on record on X and so forth, saying he totally disagrees with people who are celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. So I have to respect that. And the comments he made, from what I saw, were more political. Okay, so he's more left, right? Speaking against, the politics of the whole thing, right? They're trying to score political points and so forth, and he has a point. So was it right to actually cancel his show with political pressure? I would actually argue that I didn't like that. You know what? I'd say let Jimmy Kimmel speak. Even though I disagree with him, because we need to protect that free speech. That's the whole point, right? People we disagree with, we need to allow them to speak freely. But it's a whole other thing when you get down to free speech. Put it this way, I guess. I think we're both advocates of free speech, but if you start advocating violence, there has to be a line drawn there. Your thoughts?
Whatever remarks he made, then we also have to let Don Cherry encourage people to wear poppies, and we have to let Stockwell Day say, that he believes that systematic racism is not, entrenched in the infrastructure of Canada. And we also have to let Jordan Peterson say that he believes that compelled speech should not be allowed. And, so you can't just let one side speak unfiltered and not let the other side speak.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't get applied evenly, does it? Yeah.
Yeah, like we have to drop the double standard. And I think what happened there is those on the other side, maybe on the left side of the spectrum, they're feeling it for the first time. People are losing their jobs. Last statistic I saw was, up to 1,000 people in the U.S. had lost their jobs.
Wow.
And so, in my apologies, I have to admit I didn't actually watch the Jimmy Kimmel clip, so I don't know exactly what he said there. But I guess my point would be, Paul, that we got to let free speech run on both sides. And there has been an intense, especially in Canada, an intense cancel culture that has been active for years, targeting people who are on the right side of the spectrum when it comes to conversation. So I just say, let's be fair.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what do you think? Where are we going, I guess, over the next couple of years here now with this event taking place? I mean, is it going to be different in Canada than you think the way it's going to play out in the States?
Yeah, well, I think we have different issues in Canada, but I think some of the questions are the same. Are we going to allow ourselves to be silenced, or are we going to calcify a spirit of fear and toxicity, or are we going to make powerful choices as individuals and as society to, as we've talked about, a lot in this conversation, to restore decorum in the public square and to continue to engage? I think we all have some very powerful choices to make right now. And whatever choice we make, yourself, myself, all of us together collectively, they will be consequential. Whatever choices we make will determine the future of our nation and what type of a society nationally we give to our children. Our issues are different. We're dealing with things like revocation of charitable status for faith-based organizations. We're dealing with a double standard of decorum when it comes to public protests, where peaceful worship events are being shut down, and yet other protests are being allowed to go forward that are calling for the death and destruction of entire groups of people. We have different issues, but the main sort of moments of reckoning or decisions, I think, are the same. And so I would just encourage everybody to dig deep and decide, ask yourself the question, how then shall we live, and make that powerful decision.
And I'm out of time. Thank you so much, Faytene, for all the valuable things you brought to this conversation. Faytene.tv. And she's absolutely right. We need to engage. Now, get your kids engaged as well. All right. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe. WizeUp.ca. God bless.